Everyone for joining us this afternoon for this webinar. As you can see on the screen here, we have an agenda up. We're going to go over just a brief overview of CampusGuard in case you don't know who we are. We'll talk about the former and current working environments that we're talking about, the challenges that are presented from this new work from home area, techniques that the bad actors are using to try to steal information and make things less secure for you, potential solutions for how to mitigate those risks, and best practices in either applying or using those solutions. And at the end, we'll have a formalized Q&A session. CampusGuard is a cybersecurity and compliance company that specializes in organizations that have complex campus-based environments. Many of our security advisors and customer relationship managers are from these complex environments, giving us an advantaged insight to our customer base and the issues that they face on a daily basis. CampusGuard performs compliance assessments, including on standards like the PCI DSS, GLBA, FERPA, HIPAA, vulnerability scans, penetration tests, and provide ongoing support and training. For each of these services, you have a dedicated customer advocate team, which consists of an assigned customer relationship manager and a primary security advisor, all backed by a team of information security and compliance specialists. As a member and extension of your organization, they're able to stay closely involved with you throughout the life of the engagement, from weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly calls, to project management and handling ad hoc inquiries, to scheduling site visits and annual reviews, and everything in between. This team-based approach ensures that you have all the qualified and certified personnel to deliver the highest quality of customer care available in the market. Now that you know a little bit about CampusGuard, let's get started with the rest of the webinar. Looking at what you guys are coming from, your former work environment, things like this open office area where you have a space where you're with your colleagues, you're using institution-provided equipment. And for those times that you need to have those private conversations, you have those private meeting rooms or offices with locked doors, areas where you can retreat and have those conversations. Also, in this style of environment, you always had those ad hoc meetings that occurred in hallways or other opportunities, whether it's the break room or at the water cooler, that being together allowed you to have. But as you know, over the past few weeks, we've been working in something like this, the work from home environment. And this picture here shows, what a lot of folks end up dealing with, right? Space, wherever space is available. In here we have a picture of a laptop and a desk wedged conveniently under a stairwell. Now it is nicely painted to kind of make it feel a bit more homey. But it asks questions like, are you using institution-provided equipment? Did your contingency plans or business continuity plans include having laptops or mobile equipment that allowed you to bring that equipment home? You're most likely using more virtual technology, like the platform we're using today to perform the webinar. Could be Zoom, it could be WebEx, could be any of those. And of course, remote access. Not everything that you do is able to be performed from your device, and you're using remote desktop strategies or Citrix or something like that. Now, this change to work from home came on suddenly, for sure. It put a lot of strain on your IT resources to mobilize you as quickly as they needed to. And what really happens, and I'll give you kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment, I'm sure you've heard it from your IT friends, that if you're running an IT project, you really have to pick, from good, fast, and cheap, two of those three things. And when you think about that, and you say, well, good, fast, and cheap, well, fast was absolutely on the table. We had to mobilize. Governors issued states of emergencies that we had to, immediately do a safer at home type of stuff. And then when you look at good versus cheap and which one's going to win out, budgets have already been set. It's kind of difficult to make money materialize, and so we're picking something that's cheap, which means maybe the solution wasn't as great as it needed to be. Now, this isn't a dig. This isn't saying that you've gotten terrible and awful solutions. This is really saying that with the resources available, with as quickly as decisions needed to get made, there are going to be some challenges that come out of this. So, speaking of challenges, well, let's talk about the big and easy one, right? You now have sensitive information, well, now at home. And when you think about that, one of the big challenges, you've gone from having a network that's managed by your colleagues in IT and IT security to now being a home network. And so I guess the question that gets raised here is, who's responsible for that, the security of that network? At work, that's clearly the IT folks, but at home, it's your Wi-Fi router, the one that you bought at Best Buy or bought on Amazon.com or something like that. What else is on this network? Do you have other personal computers? Do you have kind of an Internet of Things, whether that's your Alexa smart home device or your Google Home, or you have a Nest thermostat. These things that, if you read the news, they tell you that they are, inherently insecure. They shouldn't be next to other things. Do you have those? What about game consoles? What about your other devices, your tablets, cell phones, and those types of things? On top of that, in the picture I showed you above, I think about physical security first and foremost in that picture. It was a desk with a laptop under the stairs. Is there a door that locks? Where do you store your paper files? How do you keep those things secure? And then what about things like your remote technologies like telepresence? One of the big things that has made the news after our first foray at home was the Zoom bombing, right? And for those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom bombing, this is where you have those folks that break into your Zoom meetings and they cause disruptions. And most likely these are the ones that were like, lewd or explicit type videos or postings. They could be racially insensitive and all of that, with the goal of disrupting the session that was taking place. And once the moderator loses control of the meeting, they can't kick them out. They can't expel them. You have to cancel the call. It actually turns out that a number of kind of the modern or more recent Zoom bombing incidents for distance education is actually being brought on by the students. They'll share the class link to the Zoom meeting. They'll share the password and all of that stuff to kind of get that disruption and then have class canceled. I guess it's the same or something as similar as pulling the fire alarm. Just as illegal, just as bad, but a way into causing that disruption. What about other privacy concerns, right? So we talked about in the office, you guys had those private meeting rooms, the ability to go in and shut a door. Do you have that at home? If your office is under the stairwell, do you have that space to take a confidential phone call? What about things that come in over your shoulder? So I'm not saying that this is a malicious individual, someone looking to gain access or steal things, but maybe you work in HR or payroll and you have a finance or a salary spreadsheet up. Should that information be accidentally viewed by someone that's walking behind you? And then, were you ready for remote? We talked about one of those big challenges in IT and mobilizing the workforce was making sure the right mobile technology was there. Or are you running some type of BYOD or bring your own device type of setup where it's your equipment connecting and doing work stuff? Now, this is the big one, right? That the fact that crime doesn't sleep. I think when you really think about one of the biggest challenges here is that, the criminals, they're not saying, hey, there's a global pandemic going on. We're going to take a break. We'll relax just like you guys. We'll try to keep everything on the up and up. Nope. They're absolutely taking advantage of this situation. Their main goal is to steal things, right? Whether it's resources or intellectual property or ultimately money. Using something like this coronavirus situation is really what they want to do. There's no more perfect distraction than something that's impacting everybody. You're already off balance in terms of working from home, being uneasy because everything is different. I know for myself, I have 4 kids running around here at home, and my wife is doing a fantastic job of keeping them quiet so that the webinar isn't interrupted with screaming. But everyone is a bit on edge right now because of this situation. And on top of that, these criminals who now have that distraction that they've wanted, they're using it to send out an increase of phishing email messages and business email compromise type stuff. And it's more so than just, spam for spam's sake like it was, or, the wide net being cast to try to get as many compromised accounts as possible. they're now specifically targeting folks like executives for things like the CEO fraud or business email compromise we talked about, whether you call that whale fishing or whaling or whale hunting, going after those big executives trying to make big things happen, to your friends in finance or HR or even IT, trying to take advantage of all of those types of situations to, steal that information and be able to capitalize on that or monetize that. Now, how do they do that? Well, the biggest and easiest way is social engineering. Now, this covers a pretty wide swath in terms of, what we're getting at. But I want to bring up this movie. How many guys are familiar with this particular flick? It's a Ricky Gervais film from 2009, I believe. So it's relatively old. And I guess that says something about me that I'm making old movie references. But it's a so-so romantic comedy, right? And it's basically a set in a world where no one can tell lies. Everyone tells the truth. And basically this one man, Ricky Gervais, somehow discovers the ability to tell a lie and uses it through the movie to kind of make things happen for him. And the reason why I point this thing out is that sometimes, especially when dealing with these types of situations where the social engineers are trying to do something, I really want to scream out from the top of the rooftops here. We don't live in a world where people can't tell lies. You absolutely are being lied to by these dishonest, bad actors that are trying to steal your information. And, that healthy bit of understanding what that is and knowing that, boy, that just doesn't smell right or that doesn't sound right should be there and ticking in your head. Another way of putting this is thinking about this as a magic show, right? And if you think about magic, it's all about misdirection or being able to change your view or focus. And if you think about this, as a child, I loved magic. That it was so great. Magical things would happen, things would appear out of nowhere. When in reality, it was this really brilliant act of misdirection. I would get your attention over here. You would stare at this thing off to the side. With my other hand, I would do whatever the quote-unquote magic thing was, and then I'd immediately bring your attention back to this thing that I just did, and wow, like magic, there it is. And that's what's happening with this social engineering as well, that they're creating some type of distraction. Now, we talked about something like that business email compromise, the CEO fraud. This is the one where you read about in the paper. The CEO, the quote-unquote CEO, sends an email to the head of finance saying, wire transfer $10 million to such and such offshore account. Don't ask me any questions. It's a secret deal. And the finance person says, you bet your boss, I'm going to take care of it, and bang, off it goes. Now, clearly, it wasn't an email sent by the CEO. It wasn't this. It wasn't this. And but nonetheless, real money leaves, and bad things happen. And the way that they accomplish this is they do some misdirection. It could be a network attack that strains your IT resources while they're trying to put out a fire and control what's happening to the network. These other emails sneak in that normally would have been caught and filtered and all of that. Could be any of those types of things. But again, I told you there's this perfect distraction with coronavirus and things that are going on, those phishing messages that talk about what test kits are like or how you need to do this or why you need to be socially distant, all of those things. Other examples of social engineering, you talk about these things where you get that email from supposedly your help desk saying that there's an account problem or something where you need to, confirm your password or do something of that nature. Or it could be one that, tries to capitalize on fear or empathy or curiosity, right? So how many times have you gotten the phone calls that say, this is the IRS, you owe us a bunch of money in back taxes, we'll call the police, we'll, do all those things. Or, maybe it's an email that says, and let's say that, your name is John, but you'll get an email that says, hey, Mary, here's the salary info for these staff that you wanted to get. And you go, wait, well, I know I'm not Mary, but boy, am I curious about what these people make in terms of salary, right? So your curiosity is piqued. Are they using those types of techniques to, to steal that information? So what can we do, knowing this? What can we do to help protect ourselves? And it comes down to, let's start off with getting your computer and accounts in order. So first and foremost, let's talk about VPN, or virtual private networking. And VPNs, they were originally designed to effectively allow you to take your not inside the business computer, right? So it's gone home, it's gone to the coffee shop, it's gone somewhere, and be able to securely place itself virtually within your business unit. And it does so by creating a secure tunnel, and it encrypts traffic, and it does all of that. And so its initial goal wasn't to add additional layers of security, but to provide that connectivity from a very well defined point of view. But due to the fact that it does this encryption, this encapsulation, this tunnel from your machine back to the home network, back to your business network, your corporate network, your educational network, what ends up happening is that anything that's outside of that connection now no longer sees unencrypted traffic or things that aren't adequately secure. So absolutely, VPN adds that additional layer of security. Multifactor authentication, I believe this is not a foreign concept to you guys. I think that there's a significant amount of this going on right now, where instead of just being able to authorize your credentials with just a single user ID and password, now after you do that, especially for highly sensitive systems, you have a second challenge that gets brought up, whether that's a key fob that has rotating numbers, or an SMS text message that gets sent to you, or maybe it's a mobile app like Duo or Google Authenticator or something like that. The benefits of this, of course, is that if for some reason your account were to get compromised and some bad actor in China or Russia or wherever they are has access to your credentials, that without the second factor, which rotates all the time, you're the only one in possession of, is unavailable. Therefore, they don't gain access to that system. So this is another great way of helping to protect yourself. Also, using only institution-provided equipment to connect to your corporate network, your institution network. By having that machine, which is configured appropriately and with the right IT security controls, it means that there's one less variable, there's one less way that the criminal element can get in and attack that network. Having a dedicated workspace is really nice, right? Being able to keep everything together, setting up boundaries, being able to say this is where the work happens, this is where the magic happens, and only authorized personnel are there. At your regular place of business, that's pretty easy. If you have a building that's set up for work, the office doors lock, things can be easily made secure. You think about that picture that we talked about with the laptop and desk underneath the stairwell. Well, yes, there's dedicated space, but is there an appropriate boundary? I think about my kids, right? So they range in age, 5, 7, 9, and 11, right? So from relatively young to just at the end of elementary school aged. And it kind of begs the question. I know my older kids are smart enough to know not to touch my computer, not to do things, but the 5-year-old, let's say he's like, I'm going to be just like Daddy. I'm going to go over here and touch this computer. I'm going to click these buttons. I'm going to do this thing. If I'm reckless with how I'm protecting my equipment, or it's not appropriately segmented or locked away, can he accidentally send an email? Can he accidentally disclose information? Can he accidentally do something of that nature? So that's what that dedicated workspace is going to help you with. Thinking about how different it is working from home versus working in the office, have your procedure documents been updated to make sure that it covers those nuances, the differences of working from home. I know it sounds very audity to talk about things like, you have to make sure there's a procedure, but really and truly, audit hat aside, I love procedures because they establish a baseline. They let you know what should be happening so that there is a step 1 through step 10 or step 1 through step X way of doing something. And because the process most likely would have changed, and most likely dramatically because of the differences between the office and at home, making sure you have specific work from home procedures are going to be supremely beneficial. And then additional training. being able to understand what that new threat environment looks like, understanding how those bad actors work, what a phishing message looks like, what a modern and new, what does today's phishing message look like. All of those types of things that give you that additional insight, those are the things that really help out. Now, I know you're thinking, okay, Ed, look, I've gone through it. You've told me a bunch of things in the solution, but how do I make sure that that's right? I mean, what exactly should I be doing? How is the best way of getting that done? And so this is where we talk about best practices, right? Role-based access control. This is nothing new. This is not like you guys weren't doing this before and on all of this. This is really something that sounds more like, we know you guys had role-based access control before, right? So if you work in HR, you have access to the HR files. If you work in accounting, you have access to the accounting files. But, just because I work in a particular organization, I don't have access to, cross-pollinate. I don't have more access than I need. But did anything change when you guys all became remote employees? Was there some lump of access that was granted called remote employees, that you all had VPN access that dumped you off into a spot that now you had more access or something? Remember, we told you that lots of things happened in a hurry. Did the account provisioning also happened in a hurry, and all of that? But make sure that role-based access control is still applied and still used appropriately, and containerize that access so that, again, if something bad happens, that it's not the whole keys to the kingdom, it's just a particular area that gets affected. Now, we wouldn't have an information security presentation without something talking about passwords. And, when Daryl gave the intro today, talking about me having, 20 years of experience in information technology and information security, I'm a bit of an old hat at this, and what that really means, too, is that, I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I'm a recovering IT person, right? I find that I've spent a lot of time using industry jargon and three-letter acronyms and things of that nature, and I've been doing my best to, kind of not do that, not fall into my bad habits and go back into that. But I'm going to use just ever so slightly, if you'll bear with me, some of those during the discussion of this particular slide. And what I have up here is a webcomic called XKCD. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. I know a lot of IT geeks like myself follow it. It's a webcomic of romance, sarcasm, math, and language. Doesn't it sound great? It's put out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, xkcd.com. For our friends that are on this webinar from Virginia, the author of XKCD is Randall Monroe, graduated from Christopher Newport in '06 with physics as his major. And so a local Virginia guy, and writes this thing without fail Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But this comic is it's a staple in terms of how passwords work, and basically it's telling you that over the years we've been telling you how to make strong passwords, but we've been doing so amazingly incorrectly, right? And so the picture that's on the upper left that looks like the word troubadour with kind of that standard letter and number substitution says that you have a dictionary word, you've done some random substitutions like O's to zeros and A's to fours, you've added a special character, you've capitalized the first letter, all of that stuff, right, to make quote-unquote a strong password. And when you think about strong passwords are defined like this. They're easy to remember and hard to guess, right? And by guess, we mean like brute force, or be able to guess that that's what your password is. Now, if you think about this word, a dictionary word like troubadour, right? And then the common substitutions like making the first letter capitalized, and then adding some symbol and some number at the end, and really common letter substitutions like I's become ones, and O's become zeros, and A's become at symbols, or the number 4, those types of things. You can really parse together a list of substitutions and then have a computer go through and make those guesses of dictionary words with these very, very common substitutions, and quite easily guess what that password could be. There's a measure of the complexity of passwords, and again, this is where I'm asking you to bear with me in terms of my IT geekness, but there's a measure of complexity. It's called bits of entropy. It's how many possible combinations based on the set of letters or numbers or length that you have. And this password that was defined here, this 11-character password of Troubadour &3, has 28 bits of entropy, so 2 to the 28th, possible combinations. And if you have a computer or some system that can do a relatively low number, 1,000 guesses per second, and we have computers now that if we're talking about hashes or other things that are in the millions or hundreds of millions of, or even billions of transactions per second or guesses per second. But let's call this like a web attack, like I'm going against your webmail or I'm going against something like that, 1,000 guesses per second. It would only take roughly 3 days to brute force this password, Troubadour &3. And so that falls in the category of easy. That's not a hard-to-guess password. That is an easy to guess password. And the next scene shows the guy scratching his head, right, going, wait, what was my base word? Was it trombone? Oh, no, it was Troubadour. Wait, one of those was an O, and one was a Z. Oh, man, right? And now you've got a password that's hard to remember. We've done the exact opposite of what we want. If you think about it, so the next 3 panels show you, really how a good password should be. What's happened here is there's 4 words chosen at random: correct, horse, battery, and staple. Those 4 words with spaces in between account for, and I believe my counting is correct, 28 characters in total, including spaces. And without any upper or lower case, without any numbers, without any special characters, just that set of 26 possible letters and the space of 27 characters at the length of 28 digits long, it now has 44 bits of entropy, or 2 to the 44th number of combinations. And at 1,000 guesses per second, you're looking at something like 550 years for a computer to brute force that password. Now, that's a hard-to-guess password. Now, how do you remember four such random words like correct, horse, battery, and staple? If you look at the thought bubble this guy is looking at, there's a horse. Its head is nodding. It's looking at a staple that's wedged into a battery saying, hey, that's a battery staple. Correct. Correct, horse, battery staple. You've already memorized it. Now, this is an example comic. Please don't use correct, horse, battery, staple as your password. It is a great password, but not only do the good guys use this comic to demonstrate how to make good passwords, the bad guys also know this comic exists, and they have correct, horse, battery, staple as one of the first guesses that they'll put in terms of guessing your password. So the comic's been around for a while. But that's how it works. Pick those 4 words at random. Make yourself a mental image of what it is, and you'll be surprised how easy it is to remember that. You won't have those Friday, Monday problems where you set the password on Friday and forget it on Monday, and you're in line, kind of sheepishly calling the help desk saying, hey, man, I forgot my password. Can you help me out? So that's the primer on strong passwords and really good passwords. The other thing, let's talk about this where, you have Troubadour &3, so it's got a very predictable pattern, capital letter to the front, special character, number at the end. There's another technique that Criminal Element uses, referred to as password spraying, where once every so often, once every 4 hours or once every 8 hours, your user ID, so your user ID will be collected off of websites and things like that, but your user ID and one of these passwords will be checked, once or twice or 3 times per day, not really 1,000 times per second, but really like 3 times per day maximum or something like that. And the reason for this is a lot of your accounts have account lockout provisions in them, right? You type your password in incorrectly 5 times, bang, the account is locked. You have to then wait for it to unlock, or you have to call in and get it unlocked. But if I send a single guess of that password, and I do so, and I wait, 4 hours or 8 hours, expecting that, when you log in successfully, it resets the bad password counter. So if I do it, once before 8 a.m., so it gets a bad password attempt, you log into your computer at 8 a.m., bang, it resets the bad password counter. I can then make another attempt at lunchtime or something like that. When you go to unlock your workstation, bang, it resets the bad password counter. And it takes really good guesses at things like, is your password some type of season and the year? Like, is it spring 2020? Capital S, maybe you put an exclamation point at the end, right? Spring 2020, fall 2020, Corona 2020, right? Is it something that's easily guessable and predictable? And if some of you on the phone are going, oh my God, Ed, how did you know my password? It's because it's following this very predictable method. And so if you're using that type of methodology to make a strong password, I encourage you to change it to the correct horse battery staple type of method so that you can really help augment the strength of your passwords. Now, beyond just the password, I would tell you also want to use multi-factor authentication. And we talked about this. This is whether it's that one-time password that shows up on the token, it's being sent by text. Again, the benefit here is you can have the strongest password in the world, but if it gets compromised without that second challenge, without that second factor, they will have access to your account. And anywhere where you can tie those two things together, not just for work. I mean, think about your PayPal accounts or wherever else that you have the option to add multi-factor, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those areas. Do so. It adds so much additional value for so little actual effort, right? You get the Google Authenticator app, or you get the text messages shot over. Really, quite an easy way of adding that additional security. Using unique passwords, right? Not using the same password over and over again. Not only for accounts like Facebook and your personal email and LinkedIn all having the same password, but also not using the same password between stuff you do for personal use, right, like your Facebook or your Instagram and all of that, to your work account. If those two passwords are the same, you run in the risk of having a password compromise happen at one of your personal services, and then they use that information plus where you work or something else to then use that password against your work account, and bang, they don't have to guess it because they already know it because you've reused that password. Now, I know you're thinking, look, Ed, that's a lot of passwords. How do I deal with that? The best practice here is to use something like a password manager. And I have to tell you, I eat my own dog food. I don't tell people, go through and set different passwords, but I use the same password over and over again. I absolutely have a different password for each of my services, and that includes I get a different Gmail password than I do for my Hotmail password than I do for my LinkedIn account or things of that nature. Absolutely, they're all different. Now, do I remember what those passwords are? Not a chance. I mean, I have to remember a lot of passwords in my day, through the day, and then those that I don't use every day, or those that just aren't in there, like my taxes or maybe my healthcare information. I don't use since I don't use them on a daily basis, but I want them to be unique. I use a password manager up on the screen, so there's no order of importance. I believe I typed in a Google search for give me your 5 best password managers, and I don't know if this was PC Mag or CNET. One of those said, look, there's 1Password, Bitwarden, Dashlane, KeePass, NordPass. Those are the 5 that I've listed just in icon form. I absolutely do use one of these 5. I'm not going to tell you which one. I don't want to create a bias or anything like that. But I absolutely do use one of these. I set that really good, strong password to get myself into the password manager. It then has the ability to now store each of my individual accounts and remember the user ID, remember the password. Now, again, this is only as good and only as strong as that master password that you're setting. So, again, use that great, mnemonic, right? Use the correct horse battery staple methodology to set that master password, because that one really does hold the keys to the kingdom. I did see a question come up earlier. I'm sorry for not catching it until now. The website for that webcomic, my favorite webcomic, it's xkcd.com. So X-ray Kilo Charlie Delta.com, xkcd.com. It is one of my favorites, and it speaks to me nearly and dearly as a geek. But like I said, it is romance, sarcasm, math, and language. You can't go wrong with that comic. It is fantastic. I don't believe we get any type of pushback. I just love the comic. I just love the comics, so we don't get any kickbacks from them. It's not a shameless plug. All right, so another best practice: lock your workstation when you're away from it. It's an easy one, right? I talked about my 5-year-old coming over and being able to click on stuff, accidentally divulge information, those types of things. Can't do it if it's locked, right? Windows L locks my workstation immediately. Really easy, really simple to do. You've been trained to do it at work. Please do it at home. Make sure you're taking that as a best practice. Making sure your Wi-Fi passwords are secure. you know, what's interesting here, and please tell me that you actually do have some type of wireless security. It's not like you bought your Linksys router at Best Buy and plugged it in. The SSID still says Linksys, and the admin password is blank, and you're not using any type of encryption. That's the worst place to be. Then anyone can get to your network at any time with, you know, no effort. Really, we're looking for something like having that WPA2, you know, with the encryption turned on, pre-shared key, all of that stuff. It used to be ridiculously hard for people to hack into wireless networks, meaning you had to be one of these, you know, black hat guys, you know, with your specialized hacking laptop and, you know, being able to steal the packets that are being transmitted between the computer and the wireless of a known host, and then taking those packets and analyzing them and regurgitating them and doing all this stuff to reverse engineer that Wi-Fi password to get in. On your screen, you're going to see 3, you know, kind of point and shoot or point and click type of tools to crack, you know, Wi-Fi passwords and get in. It's almost becoming child's play to be able to go in and do so. So your strength here is setting those really great and strong passwords on your Wi-Fi. Make sure you're doing this. This is, you know, anything that you can do. It's all defense in depth. Keep adding those layers. What about bring your own device? Right, we talked about this. Are you in this scenario because of an equipment shortage? Did IT not have the ability to give you something to take home that's there? You know, when I see bring your own device in use, I think about, you know, the smartphone as my first and foremost, right? I think everyone does, you know, or nearly everyone does, checking their email from their smartphone. And the way that the risk people have gone through and said, look, we think we're okay with this, is that mobile device management is in use. Something like ActiveSync or something is helping to protect that phone. It's got security controls like you must have an 8-character PIN, you must do this, you must encrypt the phone, you must, and it affects the way your phone operates. But it also has the remote nuke button, right? So if you call in saying, hey, my phone was stolen, they can push the button, nuke your phone. Do they have the same technology for iPads and for your personal laptops and things of that nature? My best practice, my recommendation to you is to, unless your IT folks have you know, some way of controlling it and they okay or they approve the usage of personal devices, we shouldn't use personal devices for work stuff because, again, there's too many variables involved in terms of how you know, how the bad guys can get in if the machine isn't locked to the right set of standards. Let's look at work files, right, and where to save them. I think everyone here is familiar with these cloud storage locations, right? You got Google Drive there on the left, OneDrive in the middle, Dropbox on the right. Those are you know, some examples of these cloud storage locations. What I want to point out here is that they are ubiquitous, right? I have a Google Drive from my Gmail account, so I have one there. I have a OneDrive from my Office 365 subscription, my personal one. And absolutely, I got a Dropbox account, the free Dropbox account, and they're 100% different than the ones that you have. So if you're a Microsoft 365 school, you're going to have institutional OneDrive, or if you're a G Suite customer, you're going to have institutional Google. You're going to pay for the institutional Dropbox. The differences between that consumer version, the free version, or the consumer version, and the institution version is really the contract, right? How the data is used, or how the assertion of the data usage is there. I always remember hearing the phrase, free isn't free, and nowhere is it more true than these free services like, the free Google Drive or the free OneDrive or all of those things. They may not use the data that they store there. I think that's a violation of privacy, and unless you get some egregious, fly-by-night cloud storage vendor, your data is still, quote-unquote secure. But all of the usage of that data, what IP did you come from, what computer, what was the operating system, what was the browser, how many times, what time of day, where did you come from, where did you go next? All of those things, when you think about, the usage data and the metadata and everything that goes into the files that aren't the contents of the files themselves, is there any risk in that getting out or that being put to use somehow? I think that there's a number of data classification policies at your institution that will talk about where you can and can't store files. And I can almost guarantee you that none of them will tell you it's okay to store them on personal accounts simply because that hasn't been negotiated appropriately. Okay, so not sharing pictures of your remote workspace on social media, right? So hashtag work from home. Look at this cute picture. This is great. Now this is a stock image, but I didn't do any investigation as to what's on that screen. But if you look at the screen that's shown there, that's an Excel spreadsheet, right? How much data is actually visible in that sheet? Is it sensitive data? Now, if we had some additional time, maybe we could use some of our fancy hacking tools to get in there, do some image enhancement and all of that, and look at it and see if it's financial data or payroll data or something of that nature. But this is the kind of thing that you don't want to inadvertently share, or maybe it's an email that's up or something else confidential. Please, 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 if you're going to do your work from home selfies, don't take pictures of the actual computer. You don't want sensitive information being lost. Here's another example. This is the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. The guy standing by the computer, sure enough, there's a yellow sticky note on there. Image enhancing technology was used to zoom in on that, and that is the password that gets into that machine. You don't want to be giving out free details. How about something in popular culture? You have this is Lisa Kudrow, right? So this is her iMac that's showing up. She's posted a selfie, posted a tweet. She's saying that she's super excited to be working on this, Amazon pilot with, Lee Daniels and Whitney Cummings, and so in the picture there's a yellow sticky note to the left of the Apple logo, and that one, sure enough, it says computer admin password, and in this picture they've kind of blanked it out so you can't see it. But if you look at this, if you think about, wow, I can't believe this is the kind of stuff that's there, you don't think about it, that's what you want to avoid, right? Understand these current threats that are out there. Know what the criminals are doing. Spend that extra time. Understand what the threat environment is. This is a, yes, get more training slide, but not training for training's sake, not just, more IT training, everybody's favorite, right? This isn't that. This is like this webinar. Did you know that you should, right? Did you know that these are the ways the criminals are doing things? Get that additional training. Raise your awareness of what's going on in the world. Now, I know that as we've gone through these slides, you think to yourselves, well, okay, I just have to be more skeptical. I just have to question more. I just have to, right? Because you are the first line of defense. You are the one that's, the one that could put all these pieces of data together and say, this looks weird, this feels weird, right? I'm not telling you to be super skeptical. I'm not telling you to, pause everything and put in a bunch of roadblocks. That's a terrible way to live, right? What I really want you to do is spend the time to understand what normal is. What does normal operation look like? What kind of emails am I expecting from my boss or from my subordinate? What kind of communication do I get? Is this weird that this thing comes in at 3 in the morning? Do they regularly work at odd hours, right? What is your normal? From my point of view, it's very difficult for me to tell you what normal is because I don't live your life. I don't know what your normal is. So I can't give you a best practice on how normal should look. But you guys all know what your normal looks like. And I think until you really analyze what your normal is, you can't know what your abnormal is. And so if anything at all, I'm not asking you to be more skeptical. I'm asking you to understand your normal. Now, here's a curveball for you. The title slide said, adjusting to the new normal, working from home, right? You're welcome. There's a new normal in town, and there's some new things to learn. But together, with all of the things that we've learned from here, we can absolutely do it. We can learn the new normal, and we can move on and be secure.